That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Welcome to BS, Beyond Stereotypes, a podcast about lawyers using their authentic voices to change the world.
I was going to have to be an outlaw. To be a transgender person was to be an outlaw. And that was something I learned very early, that I was going to somehow have to transcend the laws itself in order to survive, in order to be authentic, to be truthful. So um, I think growing up with that obviously made me much more of a civil libertarian, somebody that believes that everybody has the same rights, so regardless of their color.
Welcome to BS, Beyond Stereotypes. I'm your host, Merle Vaughn, and here with us to BS today is my friend Mia Yamamoto. Mia and I met through another organization. She was on a panel that I had, and I just knew from that moment forward, from meeting Mia, that we had to have her on BS, Beyond Stereotypes, because I found her story and her life and her passions fascinating, and have no doubt that you will as well. So, welcome, Mia. Thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mia Yamamoto is a transgender woman. Mia was born Michael Yamamoto in the Poston relocation camp in Arizona. You graduated from Cal State University with a BS in government. You then joined the Army, where you received several commendations, and then came back and attended UCLA's Law School, after which you opened your own practice. You are a criminal lawyer and an activist for transgender and the LGBTQ community. Did I get all that right, Mia?
Yeah, that's great. That's fine.
Ah, awesome. So I'm really, really excited about talking to you, particularly now with everything that's going on, in the world, in the United States. Last week we got the verdict in the George Floyd case. I just wanted to start there because you're a criminal lawyer, and get your take on George Floyd and that trial, and just find out how you were struck by all of that.
Well, getting to watch the the trial itself was actually televised, which they do with important cases nowadays, and it struck me that everybody involved, including all of the world, had to kind of go through the trauma again. Those witnesses um, had seen something and experienced something that was indelibly damaging and hurtful, and they were having to go through it again on the witness stand. And it's just the nature of this wrenching moment, and that finally a white police officer is convicted of killing a black man, something that unfortunately happens all too often and is not captured on videotape. The only reaction I had, honestly, was that I was so happy that this girl had videotaped this, because
Right.
it's always a matter of people who actually give you something like that, which is, a videotape is very powerful evidence, and it probably turned the tide with respect to that case. And I kind of looked at it that way. I thought it was just like a small, almost accidental thing that happened, that she happened to be coming by. That one
Right.
case out of hundreds, maybe thousands of other injustices, stark injustices that were being in the process of being covered up, literally, had it not been for that videotape. So I guess that's what went through my mind. But I'm the type of person, I felt sorry for everybody. I mean, I felt sorry for the judge. I mean, everybody's going through that. And, I'm a criminal defense attorney. And that poor defense attorney had to try to ward off all that evidence, that he could even find that one criminalist that was willing to
Right.
say that, watching it all play out like that so graphically on television allows me to believe that technology will be our friend going forward, that there will be more tapes and then more truth sort of infused with all everything else. I don't know.
So let me ask you this. Do you see this as really being some kind of precedent for the future in a good way, or do you think this is just gonna be a one-off?
It's got to be good if the truth is revealed through a process that we rely upon, that we want to trust. Um, Anytime something happens that where the outcome is popularly accepted, is something that is invariably what is necessary and helpful to the continuation and the preservation of a judicial system. Um, it is a system that had been losing credibility steadily over the course of time with the advent of things like DNA testing and other more scientific methods of achieving some truth. Um, Now all those things are starting to be revealed. I do see that as a good thing. I'm happy with it. Um, I'm optimistic despite all my
Yeah.
cynicism.
Yeah, right. Well, so let's move to you. Let's hear a little bit about you. I have so many things I want to ask you about, but on a personal level, and this unbelievable idea that you could be born in a relocation camp. Can you just tell us a little bit about that, and how that maybe formed who you are? And what would you want audiences who are not even familiar with the fact that was a thing? Believe it or not, there are people who don't really know. What do you want them to know, Mia?
It's like so much that's happening. You can't have reconciliation without truth. So it's like this: if I am born, and I was, I was born in a World War II concentration camp for Japanese Americans. I have to bear witness with respect to that experience and to my whole community's experience during that time, and examine the society that we're a part of. Uh, what what was wrong with that society that allowed something like that to happen? And for me, at least, it has actually, I think, defined the arc of my own life. Having been born that circumstance, I almost, well, I subconsciously have always rooted for the underdog, always known
Yeah,
that
me
I was
too.
going to be myself. I was going to have to be an outlaw. To be a transgender person was to be an outlaw. And that was something I learned very early, that I was going to somehow have to transcend the laws itself in order to survive, in
Right.
order to be authentic, to be truthful. So um, I think growing up with that obviously made me much more of a civil libertarian, somebody that believes that everybody has the same rights, so regardless of their color. Um, those kinds of things don't occur to people in a society that really is overseen and overlaid with certain presumptions about white supremacy. Bias is bias, and most people don't want to. People don't want to admit it. I'll admit it. Um, and if I spoke on the other panel with it, we all harbor biases and stereotypes. We are hyper aware of them nowadays because we need to
Right.
be in order to keep from hurting other people around us, especially doing it stupidly or ignorantly. Um, so we highlight these things in order to make all of our connections and our relationships, all our communication better. That's it in a nutshell to me. I mean, that's the reason why all of this that we're talking about. Um, yeah, biases and stereotypes are only useful if you're lazy in terms of your thinking about people. Because when you
Right.
encounter individuals, you can't rely upon those things to 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 get you through your encounter. Let me just put it to you that way. You got to start with something a lot more empathetic and hopefully open. Um,
Right. And empathy is key, right? Empathy
Mm,
is something that, like you said earlier, that you've always, rooted for the underdog. I have too. And I think that if you've been bullied, I have to imagine that you had your fair share of
yeah,
bullying. I certainly had my fair share of
that's
bullying
true.
growing up, as a
Hmm.
really smart person in Compton.
Hmm.
And it's those kind of experiences that hopefully shape us into wanting to help other people transcend all of that. And that brings me to, this other issue that I'm imagining, has been close to your heart, and that's the Asian hate that's been going on. I mean, and it's not that this is new. Obviously, you were born in a concentration camp, um, but this the travesties and that have occurred, post George Floyd, and in the last few months. What are we going to do about this, Mia?
Well, every single event that sort of galvanizes people and gets them together is good. And I'm looking at all this anti-Asian hatred and all the violence, and of course, it's awful, for those folks who are going through it. And what's interesting is, like I said, I've seen an unbroken strain of that going through my life and my history. As if you're a black person going, you can't. It's unavoidable. The experience, the attitudes, the whole history is it's
It's real.
overlaid.
The struggle is real.
But it's been overlaid by white supremacy. To be perfectly honest, I mean, you look at every element of experience around you that is crafted around certain assumptions and a certain hierarchy that people seem to just accept. And the real problem with it, as I see with Asian American people, is that you know it's to be an accomplice to white supremacy is to buy into the model minority myth, to
Mhm. Yep.
somehow, you know, be the white auxiliary out there in the world. Is from my point of view, it's like that's like major league shuffling. That's like I want to live in a master's house. You know,
Right.
so I mean, I feel like Asian Americans have been singled out for the violence, and I think specifically by Donald Trump and the whole let's blame China, let's blame all these Asians for bringing this virus here, somehow. It didn't matter. My folks got here like in the 19th century, so if they look at you, it doesn't really matter. And the one thing Asian Americans, I think, the lesson that we have learned is in my lifetime dealing with anti-Asian hatred and violence. Vincent Chin, the famous Vincent Chin case, he was attacked and murdered because they thought he was Chinese. They thought he was excuse me. He was a Chinese man they thought was Japanese, and they killed him. And I've always said these folks can't tell us apart. They don't bother to. They have a whole uh, stereotype in their crosshairs, in the bullseye. And if you're a really simple-minded, sort of primal, uh, you know, sort of Neanderthal mentality, it's like Big Boss says, "Go get those Asians," and if you're sort of frustrated and angry, the first person you're going to take it out on is the one that your boy has recommended. And this is if it would be, it's one thing to sort of single us out for this behavior, but Asian Americans have to sort of wake up to the idea that we're connected to all of racism, not just
Right.
racism against Asian Americans. There's a whole thing about black and brown people that, whether or not you want to believe it, is something that we're a part of it, want to recognize it or not. Most of us in inner cities have been fortunate to sort of, mix it up with people from all cultures. We've learned a
Right.
lot of really important lessons, and that is that we have more in common when you are united. Sort of in order trying to advance the whole community, we have more in common. When we are being targeted, it is a wake up to this commonality. that this is just the latest. We are the sort of the minority of the moment, targeting by the sort of the militant fascists who are trying to make a point about who they think is the boss, so to speak.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
this is where go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I was going to say, and that was kind of the lesson. The lesson has been learned by non-minority women, right? Is
All
that
right. Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
you really non-minority women have been able to take advantage of the diversity card, right?
Hmm.
And advance because of that. And I don't have a problem with it
No.
because
No.
it's like
Sure.
anything that can help advance the idea to quote unquote make people feel comfortable
Hmm.
is not a bad thing. But I think that what has happened is everybody who's different, and you're different if you're not a straight white man, right?
Oh, oh
Everybody
yeah.
who is different has something in common, and it really does behoove us to work together.
And the thing about it is, and it's been said elsewhere, that our diversity is actually our strength, and I think we've seen it. I think what's the new thing for some of these folks who are on the other side of this, that that we are in a diverse society, we can make it work. We've been making it work. Um, the people that are rebelling against progressive change have benefited from white preference, and the defenders of white supremacy continue politically, um, in very clever and manipulative ways to try to continue to maintain power. um, I think that there's a large issue that we're talking about here, and that you're right about women being sort of white women are second, you know,
Right.
after the white men. They would reap the benefit of a movement that, let's face it, all of us are a part of and benefited from the movement for Black liberation, which was the civil rights movement, and it ultimately was a rebellion against white supremacy. It was the front lines against an existing philosophy that was damaging to any other person who was not white. And ultimately, it's resulted in a re-examination of the whole power structure. But the main thing is that Asian American people, for me anyway, have to come to this realization that it's something about mass movement that is the only way that we can defend against anti-Asian hate. Because ultimately, we have to understand that this is all part of a backlash against something that, as far as I'm concerned, is still in motion. It's still a work in progress, called the civil rights movement, which ultimately still came from the struggle for Black liberation, completely unfinished business today, that we all have to be a part of it. It's just that was the message, or that is the message, I feel like, that Asian Americans hear this, that we are not monolithic either. Like,
Right.
we're just one giant community with a whole bunch of facets and a whole bunch of little minor communities and tribal loyalties and rivalries. And but understanding that we try to forge a place for ourselves in America, so to speak, and in many ways make sure that we can open up the doors for everybody. I still have always felt that that and it's something I've been talking about with respect to this whole struggle for international human rights. Uh, the whole Toni Morrison, if you achieve freedom for yourself, it's meaningless unless you seek freedom for others. That's
Thank
what the
you.
movement, yeah, that's what the movement is all about. That's why we move, and that's why we come together, because we can't do it alone. We have to have each other. Every time we wake up to that message and that reality and that awareness of where solidarity takes us and how solidarity defends us is is an important awareness in the middle of the struggle to know which direction you're going and why. Just on a personal level, I have to admit, I've always been, all the movements I've been a part of, it always been, it's never been a part of electoral politics. It's always been, you know, other than that, anything other than that. And this
Right.
last presidency was so bad, it actually drove me to get more involved in electoral politics. And I
Oh,
don't mean
really?
as
What
a
so what did you
candidate.
do? What have you done?
Well, getting active with other Democrats, other like Democratic clubs. They have them here in LA. Um, Doing that type of connecting up with them, and trying to figure out how I could be useful, in an election. I'll put it to you that way. Because I'm starting to look at it and realizing we can make some very big mistakes. You know, we can
Right.
vote for
Well, that's we've
horrible
shown
people.
that, right?
And so that has been a vivid and enduring lesson for me that, I can't sit these out. You know what I mean? I can't just throw money at these people. I've got to get involved. Um, so that's what Donald Trump and his ilk and the people that continue to support him, that's what they have actually done to me. It inspired me to action. So,
Right.
but that
So
also
let's
means,
talk about something a little bit more fun.
well,
I
okay.
read I read that in finding your way through your transition that you got involved in the arts and you
Yeah,
learned to
did that.
dance and play music. Let's talk about Mia's artistic side. I love that.
Well, yeah, I've been playing in bands ever since like 78, something like that. Um, that's just, I think any musician will tell you, anybody, even a part-time musician like myself, that it's that part of you that's the most fulfilling. I've always sort of sought out music as sort of a refuge, a place where I could find my own voice and myself. And it was a solitary pursuit that didn't require anything, except me singing. And what was interesting, I used to sing in bars and stuff like that with my guitar, my acoustic guitar, and it wasn't any
Uh-huh.
kind of a big deal. But I had some friends that played in a band called Prairie Fire, and they broke up. Talk about the circumstance I'm not going to go into, but I remember the bass player and the violin player came to me and they wanted me to sing for them. They wanted to start a new band. And I have to admit, when I first started playing, I kept thinking, geez, I'm just a bar singer. These rock and roll band, the lead singer of a rock and roll band. That's a little bit out of my reach.
I need
Um,
pictures.
but we started playing. We played a few gigs together, and people seemed to like us, so we started playing together. We brought on my guitar teacher, Chuck Horan, who was like just the most wonderful lead guitar player, and um, then we started bringing in all these ringers. There were people that played for all these major bands around. John, my piano player, had been the musical director on a cruise with the Pointer Sisters.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Drummer had played in the same bands with Grand Central Station and the Doobie Brothers. Um, so the band was full of ringers. I would get out there and sing, and I try to deliver the songs. Let's put it that way. Try to be the entertainer if I could be.
Uh,
And at first, I'd walk into the bars and think, "Gee, I hope they like us." That would be my first thought. And after about 10 years, I would get so much attention. And the lead singer in a band gets a ridiculous amount of undeserved attention. Just
right.
because you can sing doesn't mean that you can like read music like my piano player or my violin player. There's like virtuosos I'm surrounded by, and people want to walk up and say, "Can I have your autograph?" Thinking, "Oh my God." But I have to admit though, the experience is something I just remember thinking about that the other day, that I wish everybody could actually experience that. You go into a place and everybody's, here's your music, they jump up, they start dancing, and the whole place just, loves you. Because I remember I've had to describe the experience. That, first, you're worried about whether they're going to like you, whether they're going to boo you off the stage. Um, and then after 10 years, I walk into a place and I think pretty soon you're all going to be smiling. And then after that, very soon you're all going to be dancing. And by the end of the evening, you're going to want to take me home with you.
I love it. I love it. Well, what's interesting is that, and I don't know if it's just the people whom I have a connection to or what, but of the probably you may be number 12 interview, I think at least half of the people, the lawyers that I've interviewed for this podcast have been musicians. I've had, a rapper, the GC of the Golden State Warriors is a rapper. I
Wow,
just
yeah.
talked to the GC of the a woman, young woman who's the GC of an NFL football team. She's a bar singer. Um, the former GC of Starbucks has the Paula Boggs band. I mean, I could just go on and on. And do you have any? Because lawyers are known as being not being creative people, but I'm starting to
A
see a
lot of them
trend
are. Yeah.
that that's
I think
not the case.
I think a lot of them are. I think they have to do the left brain, right brain thing, in order to kind of find some balance, though, too. It just the the law can be so black and white. I mean, in terms of your approach to it, in terms of preparation. Um, so I think what I think music though is consistent with sort of the problem solving element of law, where you're trying to find patterns and and ways of looking at things that provide it with a perspective that's beneficial to your side, your set of facts, and your client. So the music, for me, I've had to after like 30 something years on the streets with bands, I had to memorize the songs because I can't deliver them if I don't have them completely memorized so I can sell that song.
Right.
Um, it's I don't have a good enough voice, in my opinion, in order to just dazzle them. Like, I always say I'm no Marvin Gaye. There was only one. That dude could stand there and sing and just drop everybody to their knees. He was the baddest dude alive. So I had to know the lyrics perfectly and the music and everything, the chords. I've got to get that down perfectly, or else I can't perform it. I can't deliver it. I can't bring the joyful element of that song to the audience. I think I think it's got the same thing as when I have to get out and make a speech or something, because there is an element of performance art in all of it. Um,
And
in
I
other
was
words,
gonna ask you that because as you were talking, it reminded me of what you probably have to do for an opening argument or a closing argument. It seems to me like is probably a correlation for the 2.
well, I think that trial lawyers are notoriously theatrical. I think that element
Right.
of it, but I do think certainly I think the temptation, because you have the floor as a trial lawyer, um, the temptation is to sort of expand upon what it is you're presenting. Whereas I have never felt that way. I always stick to the script. You know, I'm going to get this done. You know, and I'm going to try to do it absolutely in the most authentic way, but in terms of my own voice and my own way of looking at the case, and asking a jury to look at it that way too. And in terms of that element, there's an element of that. But like for instance, there's so many different opportunities for a lawyer to get out in front of an audience that um, I think they're synergistic though too. I mean, I think my ability to get out and do some public speaking um, absolutely helped me with the poise that I needed to be a lead singer in a rock and roll band. You've got to be able to play the role. I think
Right.
it's got to be you got to be able to feel and deliver that song. I think I do understand it after all these years now that you can't let the audience down. Just put it that way. You know,
Right. And
it's like
so this whole podcast is about authenticity. It's about, overcoming stereotypes. The real reason I wanted to do this and talk to badass people like you is to encourage people to be themselves and to be authentic. And you just brought that word, you just said the word. And you know how have you been able, or I should say, how has your authenticity made a difference
wow.
in your professional life, personal or professional life, but how have you used it to your benefit?
The I, for me, authenticity came from transition, from coming out for transgender person absolutely means adopting a completely different look in many instances and a presentation. And at least that was the act of authenticity, the absolute embrace of my authenticity that I was willing to go through regardless of what the consequences were going to be. And I had no idea what they were going to be actually, because nobody had ever done that one before. So there was really no roadmap. I had to just sort of take it as it came. It was a very interesting existential experience. Um, but I think that was the best thing I could have ever done for myself. Certainly, I think that I now speak with, at least internally, the voice that I was born to speak with. The attitudes and ideas and perspectives that I have, I think, are valuable because of that that difference, that change. Um, so when you talk about authenticity, I encourage everybody, just whatever their job, whatever their aspirations, that the most important lesson is to be yourself. You have something to give, and regardless of whether, and I think a transgender person can tell you this better than anybody, that no matter what would happen after my transition, I would rather be in that place, no matter how disadvantageous it would be, uh, and be myself, than to try to be somebody I was not. And that lesson, interestingly enough, seems to escape a whole lot of people who
Yep.
think they have to be or have to behave like people that they admire or people that they think others admire. I think that being yourself is extraordinarily important for relationships. Authenticity um, is is an act of self awareness and self confidence. Um, but being transgender, let me just say this: coming out and going through transition was for me the best things I ever did for myself. And in terms of how do I make it work for me, is that I'm still doing all the work I do in probably the same way I've always done them, but I'm doing them uh, post transition. And therefore, I feel like the way I make it work for me is I'm still forging a path. I'm still doing what I need to do to make sure that I'm allowing and opening doors, opening minds, creating opportunities, empowering others. I I do what I'm doing now as a transgender woman, the same things I was doing uh, before my transition, but now it's going to benefit a larger group of people. I've always felt that being an Asian American lawyer was pretty important, just to get in there and start something that um, became a much larger thing. I feel like the same thing with respect to the LGBT community, which at that point I now try to be a part of and try to do those same kinds of things. So for me, I try to make that change, that transition, and that resort to authenticity um, work for a much larger community. That's about the best I can say it, and hopefully do things for our community that benefit everyone.
No, 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 no. That's beautiful, and it's instructive and it's inspiring. Though I know when we did our panel, you mentioned an author. I don't remember who it was, but I was really impressed with you know you gave some examples of works that you like and that you kind of live your life by. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have some suggestions of stuff that people can read to make them embrace their authenticity more, and also people who want to learn more about the plight of people who are different.
I quoted from Charles Hamilton Houston. Was it that
Yeah.
quote? Yeah,
Yes.
he was the mentor to Thurgood Marshall. So, he was an extraordinarily important voice. I think well, the quote from Charles Hamilton Houston is that any lawyer who is not a social engineer is a parasite on society. And what he was saying was that if you're not actively making society better as a lawyer, you're making it worse. And his philosophy all the way through is that lawyers who simply live comfortable lives sort of sucking off the economy in the way they do, uh, are really parasites on society. They're giving nothing back, despite the fact that they reap the benefits, um, all the benefits, and not enough of the burdens in many ways. Because when you have power, what I think he was saying was it's immoral to simply use it for yourself.
Right.
Ultimately, if you have power and you usurp power, um, you become a liability in a society. In many instances of primitive societies, uh, people, the exploiters and the predators, um, would not be allowed in a society. And in ancient societies, they'd be put to death because they were a threat to the survival and the safety of the tribe. So that's the way I looked at lawyers. I mean, I will say this, but I will. It is from my point of view, being a lawyer can be a very fulfilling career in life and profession. It seems to me that if you're called to something higher than simply serving yourself, then you're absolutely in a place where you can do some good. What we do is about service. We are serving others, um, and the Gandhi quote, which I often use, I kind of like to rip off Gandhi, is that if you seek, if you seek to find yourself, lose yourself in service to others. That has been a saying that has stuck with me for a long time, and he's right. The better you get at serving others, at being really good, and helping other people, um, is an aspiration, um, of for any lawyer. It could be the highest aspiration. For me, I've always believed that service to the poor was the highest possible calling. So that being a public defender, my my 10 years in the office were, I saw them as sort of my postgraduate education,
Hmm.
because I not only found how to do the work, I found out why I was doing the work, why these people were really the most important people any place in the criminal justice system, the poor people, because they define the system all by themselves. They tell you whether this is the civilized system or an inhumane system. So to be there, my certainly that's my inspirations, my model, my role models were all public defenders, every single one of them. Best lawyers I ever encountered, some of the best people I've ever known. But that that drive to serve the poor and to serve them as well as the rich get served, that aspiration and that ideal, um, that's something worth fighting for. That's something worth waking up in the morning for, to get out there and rise to it, rise to the
Right.
significant challenges that you have when you do that work.
And
So
especially these days, I mean, we're in a we're in a unprecedented times, right? And we're trying to be resilient, and we're trying to make it. And these are times when we can all, if we can all just do a little bit to help somebody. I like to say that you can do good and do well. um
yeah, that's true.
and that's one of the reasons for this podcast, and one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you. It's been amazing. I'm going to give you, an opportunity. Is there anything else you want to leave our audience with, to encourage them to get beyond stereotypes and embrace their authenticity?
Well, yeah, I think I want to take off from what you just said. About doing something kind for somebody who can't do anything for you. I've heard people say that your day is not complete until you do some kind thing to someone who can't do anything for you in return. And that is something that we lawyers are given, this gift of a license, and we can do some good. We can do a lot of good, but every day, the smallest, most fundamental thing is to try to make sure you can do one thing, one kind thing for
Yep.
somebody who can't do anything for you in return. That is, to me, tells you that you're spreading the gift that you have been provided. I look at it
Yeah,
that way. That's sort of like a little watchword for me in terms of like, wake up and think, okay, what am I going to do today? You know,
that's awesome. Pay it forward, right?
yeah, to keep on doing that because it defines you. It really does. What you do for other people, what you do for nothing, um, it defines you. That's the way I look at it. Your kindness defines you. You know, if anybody thinks your kindness goes nowhere, if it's never wasted, no matter what kind of a skullduggery, you know, villain that you're kind to, because it defines you. It really
Well,
does
at least you
matter.
can look at yourself in the mirror, right?
Yeah, it's like whatever happens, whatever people, whatever how they take it and how they treat it. If I gave them the gift of kindness, then I feel like I have defined myself again. I've making the choice that it helps me through that day. That I'm still on course. I haven't abandoned my ideals.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Mia. I mean, I am so glad that we had an opportunity to do this. I feel that my life is enriched because you are in it.
Oh, good. I
And
appreciate that.
I just want to say thank you to being here to BS with me today.
Yeah, I like
And
the name.
and thanks to everyone for listening. And until the next episode, remember that everybody is different and different is good.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
We hope you enjoyed the stories shared in today's episode of BS, Beyond Stereotypes. Join us next time when another authentic personality unleashes their uniqueness on the world.